Joining me now with more is Michael Landsberg, Principal and CEO at Landsberg, Bennett Private Wealth Management. Michael, great to have you on the show. Of course, GoDaddy celebrating in the background behind us. Our viewers, I'm sure, can hear the audible on that one. Good to see the momentum here as we kick off the second quarter. Paint the picture as to where we stand for investors and traders.
I think the second quarter shapes up to be pretty good. I think the issue right now is tariffs are sucking the wind out of the room. It's all we talk about. But at the end of the day, earnings are still pretty good. We think they're going to decelerate from where they were a quarter ago, but they're still going to be up year over year. And we think that portends well to the back half of the year when we get through some of this tariff stuff.
Yeah, so let's talk about those fundamentals because the Fed Chair Jerome Powell did allude to it. We see it in the data points, including the consumer sentiment report that we got on Friday. Consumer sentiment is weakening, and some of the reads are quite astonishing in terms of the outlook on jobs. They see unemployment rising to the highest level that we've seen since the financial crisis, as well as a boost in inflation expectations. Have we seen that translate to the so-called hard data yet?
Not yet. I think one of the things that we're seeing is this quarter, I think what's going to happen is the first half, companies that report early in the quarter are not going to have any of this negative consumer sentiment. They're not going to have the tariff talk. So I think the first part of earnings are going to look pretty solid and maybe surprisingly a little bit on the better side. I think what happens is as the quarter goes on, that kind of manifested in the data. A lot of companies are going to look and say, hey, the consumer was pulling back in the back half of the quarter, our earnings are going to go down. So I think that's where we're going to start to see it manifest in that hard data on earnings is going to be the back half.
So earnings season will kick off next week. Delta Airlines now usually kicking off the earnings season for the S&P 500. The banks, a bulk of banks usually follow right after that. What is your expectation in terms of growth and what we might hear from these companies in terms of guidance with the Fed chair citing uncertainty of late?
I think when I look at like last quarter, NASDAQ was up 24% almost in earnings, S&P was up 13%. I think you're probably looking at about half of that. I think the S&P is going to be probably in the 6 to 8% number. NASDAQ will be probably down up 12-13%. I think part of that's going to be just a deceleration, but I think they're going to use the tariffs in this consumer sentiment to be really conservative on guides. I would expect the guides to come out really, really conservative, try to beat down expectations, then outperform hopefully on the backside of the year.
Yeah. So does that mean more volatility or perhaps another leg lower in the stock market between now and the end of reporting season?
I think so. I think it's going to be on certain sectors. The sectors that have gotten hurt the most, tech and discretionary, have been the best performers for the last 2 years. There is a normal expectation that we should have a rotation. I think what's happening now is people say, hey, I don't know about tariffs. I'm going to sell some stocks. What's done really well? Oh, some of these stocks are up 100, 150%. I'm going to take my money off the table there. So that's encouraging people to take money off the table because we don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. We'll get some news tomorrow, but I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the week or next week. And I think a lot of people said, hey, I'll take some money off the table. I'll park it here. And so I think there's going to be continued selling a bit here, certainly in the high flyers.
Okay, so there will probably continue to be a lot of tariff talk, including certainly tomorrow with so-called Liberation Day, as President Donald Trump has called it. Reciprocal tariffs set to take effect, a 25% tariff on all foreign-made autos, including auto parts, to be levied as well. Tariffs aside, earnings, jobs, that's going to be in the mix of all of it. How do you see the jobs market unfolding as consumers are more worried about their jobs, and we've seen tens of thousands of layoffs at least in the government?
Yeah, I think part of the issue with government, with the layoffs, is a lot of the job creation in the last 4 years has been from those jobs. And so I think the public sector jobs, a lot of them were created. Maybe they didn't need to be created. We'll see what Doge sees with that. So I think there's going to be some of that happening. The private sector started to look at laying off, but I think the idea of looking at efficiencies across the board is probably a positive thing. I think the consumer historically spends money whether they have it or not. And I think that's what we've historically seen. What I look at is our mortgage rates, our mortgage delinquencies getting to be new highs. They're not quite there yet. That's something that I look at because that will affect somebody's ability to spend. But the consumer, unfortunately, has always been really resilient. They spend money when they don't have it. Until that changes, I think we're probably okay on the consumer spending side.
How are you advising clients on how to position their portfolios right now?
I think when we look at portfolio positioning, most people that we meet, especially our newer clients, are underweight everywhere else but the US. So they're overweight tech, overweight discretionary, no Europe. So we're trying to tell people to take some money off the table and the stuff that's done well, rotate to Europe. Europe is actually growing. The data there actually is improving. And so we want to go where it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
It's tough to pick markets that are falling.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening here in the U.S.
Anything else, Michael, as we start the second quarter?
I think people want to look at diversifying themselves away from simply the Mag 7. Look for some other areas that are holding up. Utilities have held up well. Consumer staples have held up well.
Michael Landsberg is the principal and CEO at Landsberg, Bennett Private Wealth Management. Michael, thanks so much.